The Bible has its own pantheon. Yes, it does. The Bible is a polytheistic book that is typically presented under a henotheistic paradigm disguised as monotheism. Now, that's a lot of big words. I'm expecting that to go over your head, but let me just say it this way. In the Bible, there are many gods that belong a part of a faction. They're all a part of the same culture for the most part. And because of the fact that within that family, within that array of deities, one of those deities is the one in which we're following the story of in the Old Testament, it looks as though it's monotheistic, but instead it's really the story of one people and their God. So it's focusing on their commitment to their one God, not that only one God actually exists. So today I actually want to talk about the gods presented in the Bible and the pantheon that they're all a part of. So I actually don't want to stall on this at all. The pantheon that the Bible deals with is the Canaanites, or if you want to separate it a little bit, you can say it's the Ugaritic pantheon. Overall, it's East African, Mesopotamian mythology, right? So you see a few different references, whether by the deity actually being in operation or by the naming of festivals and holidays or different figures, right? So, for example, we have in the Hebrew calendar the month of Tammuz. Well, Tammuz is the name of a deity in this very same culture who's known for his death and resurrection. His resurrection marks the beginning of spring. It's that life is now on the surface, and fall and winter is when he goes back into the underworld. He's dead again, and then he resurrects in spring. That sounds a little familiar, but that's why the Hebrews named that month after Tammuz, is because, well, it starts off spring. This is when spring starts, so they named it after a spring deity. Okay. You have a few different references, right? You have Dagon being dealt with in the book of Judges. That was the one in which Samson was battling. He was the god of the Philistines during that point. You have Baal mentioned all throughout. Now, the funny thing about Baal is that sometimes it's a figure, but in general, it's just a title that means Lord. So the actual figure of Baal gets mixed around a few times. Sometimes it's dealing with one figure, sometimes it's dealing with another, sometimes it's not specific, and you're just dealing with a principality of sort. Baal is most commonly recognized when Yahweh had his showdown with Baal via the prophet Elijah, where he challenged the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah. Okay, you have Baal and Asherah. Those are also Canaanite or East African deities. Well, what about the name of God himself? What about Yahweh? Well, sorry to break the new news to you if you did not know this already. Yahweh exists as a part of this very same pantheon, and he's not the Almighty. He is powerful in his own right. He's the son. He's one of the sons of El, who actually is the Most High in that culture. That's actually where we get the word Elohim from, or all the other titles that have the word El in it. El Shaddai, Elkanah, El Elyon. These are all titles that reference in some way the imperial nature of the Father. His name is El. And El has a bunch of sons. It's typically presented as the 70 sons of El. Now, all 70 are not named and all 70 are not masculine. 70 and, well, sons really just means offspring, and all of them aren't even his kids. Sometimes he's talking about his grandkids. It's just the family of El, which is what Elohim means. So you have El as the head of the pantheon, and then he has some kids. Dagon is one of his sons. Yahweh is one of his sons, right? He has a bunch of family members. Baal is sometimes presented as a son, usually as a successor rather than son, because Baal is actually the son of Dagon in most cases. Well, if Yahweh isn't the Most High, well, who is Yahweh? Well, to the Hebrews, Yahweh is the Most High. That's their God. This is why the Bible uses specific wording when talking about the other gods, right? When he sends Elijah to intercept those generals, I believe it's the beginning of 2 Kings, he says they're acting as if they don't already have a God here. Why are they going to talk to another? He didn't say that they were invoking demons. He was jealous because they were going to a different God to get help instead of coming to him for that very help. Notice the prophets of Baal aren't presented as worshiping a God that doesn't exist, just that their God is lesser than, at least narrative wise, than Yahweh. And same with Asherah, is that he's like, I'm better than all of you, is more so his point, not that they don't exist. So those are a few different references. Now, who actually is Yahweh? Yahweh in this culture is the God of war and the God of the wind. In fact, we know this in a Hebrew standpoint. The name Yahweh is the sound of you breathing. That's why they struggle to pronounce it. It's just an inhale and an exhale. It's just the sound of you inhaling and exhaling. This is why it says, let everything that has breath praise. There you go. You get it. Okay. Now, not only was he the God of wind, but he was the God of war, which is why the name Yahweh, in a Canaanite sense, actually translates into the raider, as in Mr. Tear it all up, destroy it. Not only the raider, but his name also means the shocking horror, meaning that it's so much desolation that I'm stunned. Is kind of the idea you get behind the destruction associated with Yahweh. He was one of the most powerful gods in the Pantheon, but he wasn't even the creator of humanity. He wasn't the one who fashioned man from clay. He's not the one who fathered all of the gods. That's not how that worked. And this is an already established pantheon. You know, I got here a little too late to make some of this stuff up. Next, we have references, right? More references. I mentioned Tammuz earlier. Well, there's actually a reference within the tribes of Israel. The tribes, many different members of the tribe of Israel or the sons of Israel are named after other deities. You have Judah, likely named after Yehudi, which is a Kemetic deity, because the actual way to pronounce Judah is Yehuda. That's one reference, but there's Asher, who was treated with extra special respect amongst the 12 sons. In fact, he was the only one who never went to war. He's named after another Semitic deity named Asher. Okay. You have Molech. Molech is also in a similar category as Baal, where sometimes it's a deity, but it on its own is just a title. The name Molech just means king, so is denoting the rank of a spirit. And when I say that, it's not that I'm condoning or anything like that. I'm just being honest that sometimes it's not actually the name of a spirit, but the rank of that spirit. And the name pretty much goes unknown. In the same way, if I was telling you to look out for principality, well, the question is which one? There's a bunch of principalities. So that's kind of the case when you're dealing with Baals and Molechs, is that they mean Lord and King in Hebrew. So you got to watch out for stuff like that. There's another deity that I found fun, and this is actually the inspiration behind me even making this video, is that you have the deity known as Chemosh, who's the one who actually defeated Yahweh in battle. And they left that in the Bible. So if you go to, I believe it's 2 Kings chapter 3, it talks about a battle that the Israelites were having with the Moabites. And when they started to lose, the king of the Moabites went and did a sacrifice to Chemosh, and the Israelites got so scared that they left because they were afraid of the wrath of Chemosh. They left that in the Bible. So that's something to be noticed when dealing with this idea of monotheism, is that if there was only ever one God, why did they run? And some people try to save it. They're like, oh, well, no, he didn't actually beat Yahweh. What happened was, because of their faithlessness, Yahweh kind of just gave them over to a different deity. Okay, so he works with his brothers and sisters, is what it looks like. They're not as singular as he previously made it out to seem, if he can just give them over to a relative for the time being. So all in all, I just wanted to express the fact that the Bible has its own pantheon, dealing with dealing with Semitic or East African culture, Mesopotamian culture. There's a bunch of references throughout. A lot of verses in the Bible come from ancient Mesopotamia as a whole, specifically when you're getting to the Sumerians. The Bible as a whole is a compilation haphazardly put together by the Romans of Hebrew, Sumerian, Canaanite, Ugaritic, Kemetic, and even in some cases Hindu scriptures that already existed beforehand. They just kind of remix those around. So overall, if I were to say there's a pantheon being used here, it's dominantly the Canaanite or Ugaritic pantheon. They're pretty much the same pantheon, just dealing with regions. And that was something that you even see different regions focused on a particular deity more than others, or in some cases the same deity had a different name just because they were in a different region, but it's talking about the same guy. You got to know how these cultures work, and you actually see a lot of that happening in the Bible. You have the god of this city, the god of that city, the prince of this region, the prince of that region. That's Sumerian or Mesopotamian by culture. In fact, Mesopotamia itself is the area where the Tigris and Euphrates are. For those of you who are quick to dismiss, we're still dealing with the same region. This is all the places where the Hebrews traveled and migrated throughout the Bible. All of that being East Africa, including Mesopotamia, because that's what it was called before the slave trade. All of that was just Northeast Africa. So I don't want to ramble too much about that. I'm going to leave that where it is. Hopefully you learned something today. This might challenge you. A question that some people like to ask is, well, if the Father's name is El, what did they call Holy Spirit in this pantheon? And her name was Asherah. That's it. Until next time, y'all be blessed. If you want to connect with me, caveofmystery.org. Until next time, y'all be blessed. Later.